Hello and welcome to Quadriga. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Those are the words inscribed at the base of the Statue of Liberty. Have they been rewritten by the executive order issued last week by President Trump? Thousands of Americans say no and are massing at airports and in front of the White House to protest the ban on immigration from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Courts in a number of U.S. cities have issued injunctions stopping implementation of parts of the decree. In a call with Trump, German Chancellor Merkel voiced her own criticism, but he insists the order makes America safe again. U.S. entry ban, the end of an open world? That is our question on Quadriga today, and it's going to be answered by 3 people who are following transatlantic relations very closely. It's a pleasure to welcome Rieke Havertz. She works for Zeit Online with a focus on the U.S., and she says Donald Trump's Muslim ban shows that he is going to be exactly the president a lot of people feared he would be. Relentless, short-sighted, and ill-advised by his inner circle. And it's a pleasure to welcome to the show Thomas Leiser. He's originally from Texas. He's chairman of the organization Republicans Abroad here in Germany. And he says limiting access to the U.S. for citizens of 7 primarily Muslim countries is necessary and right. With this measure, U.S. President Trump just fulfills a campaign promise. And finally, it's great to have Alan Posener back on the show again. He's an author and commentator for the daily newspaper Die Welt. He says Muslims are protesting against Trump's travel ban, but anyone with an Israeli passport or even Israeli visa is banned from entering 16 Muslim countries. Where's the Muslim protest against that? Mr. Leiser, at last count, 5 courts in 5 different U.S. states had issued injunctions against this ban, against this executive order, based on a determination that it is legally deficient in whole or in part. Many legal experts say that it violates provisions of the U.S. Constitution and treaty law, yet you say it's right?
To the extent that a country can limit who enters it, I think it's correct. I don't think you should put a religious test on it, for example, and it appears that in haste to get this out, that may have happened. But I think we should be able to limit or at least study who comes into any country. Germany, the United States, France should have the right to police its borders.
Rieke Havertz, the President of the U.S. does have pretty broad authority under domestic law to regulate immigration. So does Mr. Leiser have a point there?
Well, he has a point that, of course, every country, every president has his right to control his own borders. But I think what Trump did, he put clearly a spin, an ideology spin on this executive order, and he tries to ban mostly Muslim people from entering the United States. And I think he clearly tries to reignite fear of the Islamic world into the United States and the people who live in the United States, and I think that is very dangerous.
Alan Posener, your opening statement seems to advocate a kind of tit-for-tat theory of what's right. You say since Muslim countries ban Israelis, the U.S. is perfectly entitled to violate its own constitution and values. Is that really a sound basis for an international order, saying you put up your walls, you close your doors, so I'm going to close mine?
That's not what I said. What I'm saying is there's a double standard here. They're talking about a Muslim travel ban, which is just not the case. There are 56 predominantly Muslim countries in the world. Of these, 7 are met by this ban, and one of these is Iran, which is a sworn enemy of the United States. They go around chanting death to the USA, the great Satan, every day in Tehran, and the other countries are mainly failed states, which are failed states because of Iran's intervention, or like Syria, where Iran and their friends, Mr. Assad and the Hezbollah, are just murdering people on a daily basis. So another one is Iraq, where Iran is basically taking power and murdering people. So, you know, I mean, we're not talking about a tit-for-tat here. We're talking about double standards. There is no Muslim ban, but there is a ban in Muslim countries against citizens of the Jewish state. And there has been no protest against that in the West, as far as I can see, except for people like myself. And we're, you know, a tiny majority. I'm just against double standards here.
But you don't have any qualms about the constitutional or moral merits of this executive order?
Not about the... Well, no, no, I don't. I think it's perfectly... this executive order says, until we have a vetting process in there which ensures that no terrorists are going to get through, we're going to suspend immigration rights. Now, why Germany? Germany pays Mr. Erdogan of Turkey not to let any Syrians into this country. Why we should be throwing up our hands I don't know. We're much worse. And if they do get in, we keep them in camps, in Lampedusa and places like that. Why we should be angry at this, I just don't... This is double standards. You know, I'm no friend of Mr. Trump's, but this is the wrong place to pick a fight.
Let us hear what Mr. Trump himself had to say about the order. He says that it does not discriminate against Muslims, but simply aims at controlling a terrorist threat.
We don't want them here. We want to ensure that we are not admitting into our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas. We only want to admit those into our country who will support our country and love deeply our people.
Rieke Havertz, who's them? We don't want them in our countries. Terrorists or Muslims?
I think that's exactly the problem. I mean, who is them? You're talking about double standards, but where's the double standard here? I mean, it's just banning people randomly from entering the country. I'm not against having a vetting process of people coming into whatever country it is, for that matter. But just saying we don't want terrorists in this country, who is the terrorist? Is an Iranian student a terrorist? I mean, I think that is a double standard right there. And so I think there's not much you can really put on this executive order. This has a lot of flaws. It's not well thought through. I think Stephen Bannon had a lot to say in how to craft this executive order, and he's been one who's trying to be Islamophobic for years. He put that on Breitbart. So I think we see a lot of flaws in this executive orders, and there is not them. Who is them? There is no them. There's individual persons who have a right to enter the United States.
Thomas Leiser, I actually brought a copy of the order with me, and
Okay.
I am actually a lawyer by training, so
yes.
I did read it through to the end. And in fact, as you mentioned, it does make an exception for people from these 7 countries who belong to religious minorities and have been persecuted on that basis. Now, that, in fact, would be Christians. So it makes an exception for Christians. That is beginning to sound like a Muslim ban, isn't it?
I think everything's a matter of degree. I take it could very well be against Muslims, and to me, that's not how you should do it.
But that, of course, is what President Trump promised in his election campaign, isn't it?
He promised he would restrict the influx of people from certain countries and primarily certain religions until I think the quote was, until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
And do you worry about that being in violation of our Constitution? We, of course, were based as a country on the idea that people should not be discriminated on the basis of their religion.
Look, I'm the son of immigrants, and I moved back from my parents who moved the other way. I think that is a valid concern, and although I think we should vet strongly he or she who we let into the country, I think religious background should not be a test.
Let us now take a look at who is being affected by this order.
Dalal Aliyah and her family managed to escape from Syria, but many of their relatives still live there. Dalal's husband, Bill, says that the restrictions announced by the Trump administration have made his family's future more uncertain than ever.
It's going to affect me in a very negative way because I'm not going to be able to bring the rest of my family. I have my brother-in-laws and my cousins still there, and we're communicating with them, and they're dying.
He didn't do anything that's not good. We have to do something for them.
These U.S. policies are making life difficult for many refugees. Will basic American rights be sacrificed as part of the war on terrorism?
Alan Posener, among the people who are being denied entry right now are people who've worn the U.S. military uniform as translators, as drivers for U.S. military forces in Iraq, people who have been vetted for as long as 10 years, through masses of interviews, through very complex bureaucratic procedures. They are being denied entry into the U.S. Do they not have a right to American protection?
Presumably they do. But look, these are exceptions, right? I'm not saying this ban is well thought through, well executed, and so on. These are the exceptions. Of course, they're being pushed into the foreground by people who have a completely different agenda, namely to say that everyone has a right to come to the US no matter what, and they don't. Yeah. And quite frankly, talking about religious, differentiating according to religious minorities, if in the 1930s, Jewish people that come from Germany, you think they should be treated exactly the same as people who were non-Jewish? I think not. I think there should have been. I think the United States government, and unfortunately President Roosevelt did not. Yeah. What he should have done would have said, we are going to take primarily the people who are most persecuted, namely the Jews. So he should have differentiated. It's non-commonsensical to say we're just going to take anyone. It's obvious that Christians, that Yazidis, that other religious minorities are suffering more in Syria than sort of mainstream Muslims, and also that these people are not going to pose a terrorist threat in the United States, whereas the others might. Now, you know, that's just common sense.
But just saying the others might doesn't. I mean, that doesn't make sense. To just because they might just put a ban on all of them. I think that's
let me tell you, when up till recently, when you travel to Israel, if you were born before a certain time in Germany, you were given a different kind of screening than if you were born sort of after World War II. That's and you might, because you might actually have been a Nazi, because so many percentage of the German population were. Now you might say, well, that's horrible, but I think that's just common sense.
So, but why don't? Go ahead. Why don't put a ban? Why don't include Saudi Arabia in this ban? Because those who actually have been terrorists in the United States on United States ground has been not from these 7 countries who are under the ban.
Because Saudi Arabia has a very good security force which actually weeds out terrorists beforehand.
There's some other theories about that, but I'd like to come back to the list of countries in just a second. Mr. Leiser.
Yes.
The way that this executive order came into being is entirely different from the normal process. President Trump broke with established procedure for executive orders. Normally, they are worked out in complex cooperation with the affected federal agencies over a period of weeks or months. Again, you say the order is necessary and right, but is this the right way to make policy? Hasty, chaotic, overnight?
Well, as a very conservative fellow and one who would like to think he's a deep thinker, I think caution and due diligence should be the order of the day. I don't think it was in this case. It seems like this order went through very quickly, and now they're doing a lot of backtracking to make changes to come up with the exceptions that should have been in the first place. I mean, for God's sakes, you've got a member of the German parliament who allegedly can no longer travel the United States, and he's been to practically every state in the country, in the United States. And to me, that is nonsensical. He has an Iranian passport, but clearly not a terrorist.
Rieke Havertz, regardless of the formal legality of the order, is it doing damage to the standing and reputation of the U.S. abroad exactly for reasons like the one just cited?
Well, I think it does do damage to the United States because it was not well crafted, it was hasty, it was short-sighted. I think no one really thought about the consequences, what this could be a signal abroad to his foreign policy, but also domestically. I mean, what does Trump, of course he said he promised during his campaign, so now he can say, well, this is one promise I keep, but I mean, does he really want a society that is even more fearful than Americans already are? I don't think he wants that, but maybe he does want that, and that's exactly why he did it.
So let us turn now to the actual effectiveness of the immigration order, a point that a couple of you have mentioned already. The order is formally entitled Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States. Let's take a look at exactly which countries it affects and how.
Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. the 7 countries that are listed in the President's executive order. But no one who committed a terrorist attack in the U.S. after 9/11 came from any of these countries. At the same time, the U.S. has carried out air or drone strikes in 5 of the countries this year. U.S. domestic security measures have been stepped up sharply since the attacks in 2001. But 15 of the 19 9/11 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. The other 4 came from Egypt, Lebanon, and the United Arab Emirates. The U.S. has strong economic ties to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and several other Muslim-majority countries that are not on the list. This raises questions about possible favoritism. What is behind President Trump's very public snubbing of the Muslim world?
So, Thomas Leiser, you said the order is necessary as well as right. But, as we heard in the report, none of the terrorist acts committed in the United States since 9/11, in fact, have been perpetrated by someone from these 7 named countries. And I was looking at the figures. Since 9/11, 123 people have been killed in the U.S. by terrorist attacks from Islamist terrorists, as opposed to 230,000 killings overall. If President Trump wants to protect Americans, wouldn't he do a lot better to formulate some executive orders on gun violence?
I think that's a different conversation, but one could argue that. I think with regard to this order, to me, the concept is we should protect our borders and vet people, all people who come in. I'm not so sure that picking out these 7 countries was the correct thing to do, and that there'll be much gain by that. But if you catch everyone who comes in and give them a strict vetting, I think that is what should happen.
This strange absences on this list, Rieke Havertz, what do you make of that? Saudi Arabia and Egypt, the countries that the pilots came from, the countries where Al-Qaeda, the founders, originated. Pakistan and Afghanistan, 2 countries where extremist Islamist terrorism is deeply rooted and has been for quite a while. Isn't there a very, very strong argument that this order, in fact, completely misses some of the most dangerous countries, and if anything, could serve as a propaganda for recruiting jihadists?
Well, it certainly is a very erratic executive order, and I think Mr. Posener made a good point in saying that Saudi Arabia is a close ally to the United States, and of course you don't want to mess with that because it's a very important player in that region that is a very troublesome region. But also I think there are also economic reasons why Mr. Trump chose to include certain countries into this ban and others he didn't. But of course, as I don't know what Donald Trump thinks, I don't know if that was the reason behind it, but I think there's clearly some questions to be asked why he picked those countries and others he left out.
Alan Posener, what do you make of these rather glaring exceptions? You told us why you think Saudi Arabia was off the list, but Egypt, Pakistan, Afghanistan?
What are you saying? Are you saying put them on the list? I mean, you're saying he's not doing enough? What is this about?
I'm asking you, is this an effective order? Naming these 7 countries, which happen to be the countries, as we saw in the report, that have been torn by violence, where the U.S. also has conducted bombing operations, where the U.S. also has some responsibility for the massive conflagration in the region. And other countries not on the list.
Right.
It's a very arbitrary, badly crafted, rather chaotic description of where potential threats might come from. And you're still thinking it's an effective order?
I don't know if it's effective.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well, if you ask for the rationale of this...
No, I'm asking you, is it effective, in your opinion, as a means of combating terrorism?
I don't know. Mr. Leiser doesn't know. You don't know. We don't know if it's going to be effective. What I'm saying is these are countries, with the exception of Iran, which are failed states, where U.S. cannot cooperate with the security forces on the ground there, as they can with Egypt and with Saudi Arabia, because there are no security forces on the ground. Libya is a fiefdom of different warlords. Syria, there there is no security there. The security forces which are there are opposed to the United States, are terrorists themselves, Mr. Assad. And we could go through these. And yes, in the case of Libya and Syria, at least, the United States, under President Obama, bears a great responsibility for the destruction of these states. In the case of Syria, because they did nothing against Mr. Assad's aggression against the Sunni majority, and in the case of Libya, because they helped the Europeans to remove Mr. Gaddafi and then put nothing in his place. Yes, the United States bears responsibility. Yes, they should have done more, but that was on Mr. Obama's watch. Now you have failed states where the United States cannot work together with the security agencies, and so they have to find these vetting procedures. Now,
but is the right answer to the responsibility the United States clearly have to say no Syrian refugee is allowed into the country, and they don't have the 4 months on the Syrian refugees? They have like a infinite ban.
I've been on this show enough times, and you've heard me say this. The United States and Europe should have had a no-fly zone in Syria to protect the refugees within Syria and to form a basis for fighting the Assad regime. And if you topple a regime like we did in Libya, then you have to go in like we did in Iraq and make sure that there's a stable regime in place. And if you go in like we did in Iraq, then you can't just pull out like Mr. Obama did. I've said all this.
Let's leave it. You have said it all. So let me ask you this. Costs and benefits. The order has very real costs in terms of the U.S. standing in the world.
I don't think
benefits, our report pointed out, no terrorist attack has been perpetrated in the U.S. by people from these countries. What expected benefits do you think are going to come from this?
Well, let's talk about the costs, first of all. This is not going to recruit any terrorists. Terrorists are not recruited because of anything we do. Terrorists attack us because they hate us for what we are. They hate us for the fact that women are emancipated in our countries, not because we don't admit them into our countries. They hate us for who we are and what we represent. This attack, so that, as far as the cost, it's zero. As for the benefit, we'll see.
Yes. That's not the opinion of the esteemed Republican Senator John McCain. You're a Republican. Do you not give any credence to his words or to those of Lindsey Graham, also a Republican, who say this is the wrong message?
I tend to agree with McCain and Senator McCain, Senator Graham. I think the message should have been we will strictly enforce our borders, period, and leave out this country, that country, or the other. On the other hand, there is a precedent for some of this. I think President Carter excluded Iranians back when my hair was black, and President Obama stopped a lot of immigration temporarily as well. So from Iraq, and it's you know the
temporarily.
Well, this is allegedly that too.
Except for Syrians. Except for Syrians.
Can I just, because our time is running out, let me just come back to the title of our program, which poses the question whether this is the beginning of the end of an open world. And I'd like to ask all of you, other countries have, some of them, been quite vocal in saying that they don't think this is the right way to go, including your own country. Rieke Havertz, the Chancellor, spoke on the phone to President Trump last Saturday and said afterward as well that she thinks this is the wrong approach. What, if anything, do you think other countries should be doing, and do you think it's having any impact in Washington?
Well, I don't know if anything has any impact on Donald Trump so far. It doesn't seem to be like that he listens to a lot of people except for his very close aides. And but I think you should be very outspoken in your critique of this. And I mean, global affairs are so important, and foreign relationships. And I think it's very difficult for the German Chancellor because, of course, there are close transatlantic ties. But I think you have the responsibility to say that this is not well crafted. This is not the way to go, and that this puts America back into being more isolated. There's a chance it could be more isolating America, and I don't think that's a good way to go these days.
Ellen Posener?
Merkel's playing to the gallery. I mean, she's playing to her public here at home. This is like a free kick for her. I mean, this is, you know, of course she's going to put it in the goal, but Germany is sending people back to Afghanistan as we speak. Now, what right do we have to criticize the United States?
So, I mean, you're not concerned that a Trump presidency could mark the beginning of a kind of a Fortress America approach to the world?
Yes, I am concerned because he's pulled America back out of the Trans-Pacific Trade Agreement.
I want to pose that same question to Thomas Leiser. So, Thomas Leiser, in a word, beginning of the end of an open world?
I wouldn't say that. It's just, at the moment, it's completely uncertain. You have a fellow who is not playing by any rule we know, and that is probably one reason why the Bundeskanzlerin is so upset, or not following any rule is not the German way to do things here, especially.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for being with us, and thanks to you out there for tuning in. See you soon.
Thank you.